they're diving into identity politics, whether it be, white people talking about their whiteness or whatever, or if you're complaining about white people and whiteness or whatever. Anytime you touch that, you can't help but sound like the people that are
leftists.
Yeah, like you're leftists, like you're a victim, like you need some kind of special accommodation because people are offending you for talking about that. And it doesn't matter who does it. It doesn't matter whether it's a Jewish person, a white person, a black person. It doesn't matter. That's just the way you come off when you go into that area.
I got to issue what I wouldn't describe as a hard journalistic correction, but a failed, what's the right word? A failed insight on my part. I said the other day that Candace and Ben arguing over this stuff and having a kind of a public spat is just good for the Daily Wire. It's press attention, which is true. And that it probably wouldn't go beyond this. They're going to criticize each other. But now Ben's telling her to quit, which I don't know if you guys have legal expertise to some degree, but it seems to me that if you have a contract with someone and then you publicly say you should quit, you've just given them legal recourse to terminate their contract.
I think what's going on here is that Daily Wire is a fiefdom, and they like to have kind of a stable of people in their team, but who are completely under their thumb. Remember the Crowder business, which happened not that long ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was so odd because what would appear to be a private negotiation suddenly erupts into public. Well, why? Well, apparently what Crowder was kind of balking against was the idea of, quote, being owned by the Daily Wire, right? And I think this is what's going on here, is that Candace is a very independent spirit. She's actually got a pretty good ego. She wants to be her own person. And yet somehow she's corralled into the Daily Wire stable, and they expect her to, quote, behave. And she doesn't really think she needs to. She's Candace.
She doesn't need to.
She doesn't need to.
Yeah.
And so I see this as a kind of, you could have had the philosophical debate without this acrimony. So it's very interesting that the two have become conflated.
But do you think Ben Shapiro could have had the philosophical debate without the emotion behind it? Because it's so much tied to his core identity and how he views the world. Maybe Candace could have, because she's a little bit more removed, but someone who's tied to the religious and ethnic groups that are involved, it's much harder.
Well, I think that is right. I do think that this is the make or break issue for Ben. Mm-hmm. I think it is the lens through which other issues are filtered. And also, even if you take a position that said something like, this is anti-Israel, but it's not necessarily anti-Semitism. Boom, you've violated the taboo. You're suddenly on the outs. So I think this is a case where in Daily Wire, a relative lockstep is being demanded. Mm-hmm. And Candace just won't play along with that. And so you've got this public spat. And
I assume this happens at all major media companies, right? I'm sure Fox has had the same issues as it's grown. There are some people who feel as though they can't question their boss on certain issues.
Well, the thing about it is, you want to be clear in advance about what you stand for. So if Daily Wire were basically say, listen, we want a variety of views, but kind of no variety on this one topic. This is kind of a bright line for us. Then you wouldn't join Daily Wire if you intended to step out of line. Mm-hmm. But it looks to me like what happened with Daily Wire was that they were like, let's get some really big personalities into our tent. And even the phrase that was used in the context of Crowder, wage slavery, which is kind of an old phrase out of Marx in the 19th century, that's what really rankled Crowder, because he's like, I'm not going to be your slave. Mm-hmm. You might pay me well, but nevertheless, I'm still my own man. And I think I hear the same echo here.
I gotta tell you, man. When the Crowder thing went down, I brought up how we had negotiations with the guys at the Daily Wire, and I think they're fantastic. The negotiations and the conversations that I had with co-CEO Jeremy Boring were probably the most refreshing business negotiations I've ever had in any circumstance, where I felt like he wasn't lying to me.